Hey everyone, welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. I'm your hostess, Dr. Audrienne McKeon. And today we have Pierce Duncan. Welcome, Pierce. Please
Hi.
introduce yourself.
Hi, Adrian. Thanks for having me on your show.
You bet. It's
My
my
name is
pleasure.
Pierce Duncan. Yeah, I am a singer-songwriter and a new podcast host. I've been in bands for my whole 20s, and I came to a new project this summer and started a new project, which was my podcast. And the mushroom told me to start a podcast, so that's what I did.
The
We can
mushroom
talk more
told
about
you.
that. Yeah.
Please, let's dive in right there. What does that mean?
Yeah. So this summer, I was out of work due to COVID, and I took a trip up to Big Bear, which is here in Los Angeles, a little getaway.
Mhm,
And I took some mushrooms, which are psilocybin mushrooms,
mhm.
which are becoming more popular. Well, I guess they've always been kind of popular, but
Yeah, now they're becoming more legit, I guess.
yeah, I think so.
Less illicit.
Yeah. So I just had an awesome experience where I was trying to brainstorm a little bit. My intention was to find out what my next step was in my music career.
Uh-huh.
So on this experience, I was pretty much shown that podcasting is a medium, and I didn't know much about it. I watched some podcasts. I like listening to podcasts, but I had no idea what was going to go into it. The mushroom was communicating with me, basically. It's like I was probably communicating with myself, but
Yeah,
it was telling me, do this. You can do this. This is your next step. Try it.
that's
So
awesome.
that was that.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to kind of tune into our own intuition, right? To listen to that little
Yeah.
voice in the back of our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm just going to dive in with the first question that I usually ask, which
Sure.
is what story is the world not getting?
Yeah. So I would say before COVID started, I had a really hard time with work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people did, and we didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like things were getting really hard for me to stay creative, to express myself. I was working a lot, and all my creative energy was kind of going into my job, which was like in sales. You have to have a lot of creative energy in your jobs too. You can't just be creative and an artist at home and then, it's hard to turn off. But what was happening was I was being creative and using a lot of my energy for someone else and
Yeah.
their projects, and I wasn't focusing on my work. And back in my back in my 20s, when I was in my band, I was pretty prolific. And once I kind of got on my own and I moved to California where things are more expensive, everything became about work and making more money. And I was really sacrificing my priorities for work. So I don't know if people are not talking about it in like the media and whatnot, but I think that work-life balance and even creative balance is so important for people, even if you're not an artist. I think we all have opportunities to be creative and to use that part of our brain that a lot of us don't get to use because we're so focused on work. So I'm just so happy that I got the opportunity to take a step back and figure out how to be prolific, because I think that's really important to becoming good at your craft.
Absolutely. Stress about money is the number one killer in this country. That is the thing that kills us more than
Mm,
anything else. And so it is a huge problem that I do think, maybe people are talking about, but I don't think they're talking about it enough. And I don't think they fully understand the implications and the implications of not giving your gifts and not creating what you're called
right.
to create. I really think that that kills us
Yeah.
little by little.
And the validation of being paid for what you do can be a tough one too, because it's like if I'm not making money or I'm not able to pay my rent from my artwork, oh, I must not be that good, or I must not, why am I wasting my time on it?
Yeah,
And
there's
that's kind of sad because I think a lot of people probably just give up on
absolutely.
on their work and their craft.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been this journey of getting my ego out of my creative work, and like to
Interesting.
stop judging it and stop asking myself, like, is it good enough? Is it
Mm,
good enough to call myself an artist? I think that's like the big question is like, am I allowed to call myself a
Hmm.
creative type or an artist? Like, of course you are. Like we all are. And just to
Of
get your
course.
ego and that judgment out of it and just stop thinking about like, is it good enough by whose standards? Who decides? It's all a matter of opinion. And, your stuff might be exactly what somebody needs. And then somebody else will be like, "Well, that's a bunch of crap." But you'll only listen to that guy, you know? Like
Totally.
yeah,
Totally. Sometimes artists even can hate a certain piece of work and someone else will absolutely love it. It'll
I
be like
think
their
that is
favorite
so true.
song and someone like, really? You like that song? Like that's one of my least favorites. They're like, I
It's
can't even believe
so
I put that out.
yes. I mean,
You know?
I can't even tell you how many times I've had that experience of like, I'll have my favorite, like my first, season of the podcast was just me telling my own stories. And, there's a couple of stories that I think are like my best stories, right? They're my favorites and I always recommend them to people. And a couple of times somebody has come back with like, yeah, that was pretty good. But the one I really liked was, and it was like something that
Hmm.
like, just, it was an offhand, I just was bored one day and like came up with
Hmm.
this little story. And I was like, really? That's the one that really resonated with you?
Funny.
Yeah, people are different. You There's
Totally.
something for everybody.
Totally. You just never know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've talked a little bit about your journey of last year and the
Yeah.
gift that has come out of that. But let's
Hmm.
go back to the beginning. Let's go to that moment where you realized that something wasn't working.
Oh man. Well, I've struggled with anxiety and depression for probably my entire adult life, probably going back into even childhood.
Yeah.
I lost a grandparent pretty early. That was like a surprise. It was like uh, a botched surgery,
Oof.
and she was living with us, and she was 57, my grandma, and I was the oldest son, so all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden I was 11, and our whole world just like got flipped upside down. And ever since then, I think I took on way more like mental anguish and responsibility of some kind.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've just been probably kind of just anxious, and I think anxious feelings turn into depression with a lot of people. They kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So if we're going to go all the way back, I would say I actually wrote a song about it just not too long ago. It's kind of a breakthrough song because I had a journal, a prompting journal. Have you heard of anything like that?
Yeah.
My girlfriend got me a prompting journal on anxiety, and one of the questions was, "What was the last time you didn't have anxiety or didn't have it?" And it was like, "Whoa, that's a huge question. Like, seriously, when? Like, I never asked myself that." And I had to really do some searching, and I identified a time that I went camping with my dad and my brothers, kind of probably before this whole grandmother passing away thing. And it was an eye opener for sure. So I think I've tried to use some of that anxiety and depression to come through my artwork. And when I have an outlet and you can express yourself, life is much easier and much. I wouldn't say you're happier. It's just you feel like there's less pressure on yourself or something. It's like releasing. It's constantly like releasing the pressure.
Yeah.
So I was in bands in my teens and into my 20s, and super fun. I was always writing and playing shows, and it was always so busy. I think that had an effect on me for not paying attention to how stressed I was or how anxious I really was. Although it showed in other signs, other physical signs, which I had to take care of later, which it always manifests coming out in physical if you're not taking care of it.
Yeah. It always does, right? The mind and
So
body are
yeah,
very connected. I want to go back
right.
for one moment though. You were talking about, this experience with your grandmother.
Mm.
Do you feel like you took that on as you should have been able to do something or you should have been able to control the situation somehow? Do you think that's where the anxiety came from?
No, I think it was more of I had to be the I had to be an adult all of a sudden or like grow
Ah,
up.
got it.
Like
Yeah.
I was 11 and I had all these younger siblings. I have three younger siblings who
Yeah.
depended on me and looked up to me, and I was kind of like the liaison between adults and my siblings.
Mhm.
So but there's a lot of confusion when you're 11. You don't know what's really going on or how you feel about these things. I think this
Yeah.
is somewhat of me processing how it how it all went down. Um,
Absolutely.
but I think it was my mom's mom, so she was completely down and out during all this. So I
Yeah.
had to kind of step up. My dad didn't know how to do all these things correctly, and I was kind of like the other big person in the room trying to be, or like it felt like it was kind of my responsibility to help people in my
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
I think I got a lot of how would I say, like anger, or like almost like a passive aggressive anger too from other parts of the family, because she was living with us, but she also had other kids too in other places, and they almost felt like it was our family's fault. It wasn't, and I don't think they really felt like that, but it was a lot of family pressure, like coming towards us, and like all these things were happening, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
But I think that made me grow up really fast.
Okay. So you grew up
Yeah,
fast
I think so.
and got this anxiety.
Yeah,
And then you were in these bands. And
yeah.
did that creative outlet help at all, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, just being busy with something can really help depression for
Sure.
sure. Maybe not so much anxiety, but the depression part, absolutely, because it keeps you focused on something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what led into this next part of my journey, which is my late 20s, because I was living in the Midwest doing all these things with these bands, and I was living in Nashville, Tennessee. My band is called Tax Brandywine, by the way. We can talk about that at the end too.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a lot of fun. We were living together, having a good time, just being like a 20-year-old types of things.
Sure.
But then that kind of wore off, and it's time to try new things. So I wanted to go solo because I was always the front man and lead songwriter, and I was doing all the things mostly. So I was like, I can try to do this on my own. I can make decisions faster or whatever. But because I didn't have a certain project, even though I was solo, there was no like deadline. There was no other people looking towards me to say, when's your next thing coming out? It's like whenever I feel like it. Not having a project was really a bummer, I think. And it really like stopped me being able to be prolific. I
Mm-hmm.
keep using the word prolific because I think it's really important. Um, and I think that's the key, because writing every once in a while or being an artist every once in a while can be good, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to advance or get better, which was my goal. Um, because this is what I always wanted to do, was to be an artist and make it my life focus.
For me,
Which yeah,
I think it's a devotional practice, if I could say it that way. It really feels like this is my way of thanking the universe for giving me these gifts,
hmm,
is just using them regularly.
yeah,
It's just saying like, look, thank you so much. It's like if you gave your kid a really expensive present and then they set it on the shelf, you'd be pissed, right? Like,
yeah,
I want to come in and see you playing on that iPad every dang day, like,
right,
and really appreciating it and using it to create cool stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it is a gift.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, I had to develop it, but it is something that even the desire is a gift in itself.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
just the fact that I want to write a song and show it to the world is something that is cool, because otherwise I could be just doing something else that wasn't as creative or fun, because
Yeah.
I have a lot of fun.
Inspiration is always a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think creating is so fun. That's what I always wanted to do.
Hmm.
And that's the kind of work that feels effortless to me.
Yeah. You're in the
So
flow.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. So then what happened? So you were prolific and then you weren't.
Yeah. Then things got harder for me. And then
Hmm.
I think I was waiting for permission too much.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
So
It's a big one. Waiting for
right.
someone to say, "Hey, you, come out of obscurity. Come
Yeah.
come up here in the spotlight."
Yeah. Or waiting for other people to um not judge me either. It was kind of weird because I was in a
Mm.
relationship where this person was very sensitive, extremely sensitive. And when I would try to write music, they would think that it was about them or not about
Mm.
them, and that would cause problems. And I'm like, why can't I just write about something? Like, the song could just be about a fake person. Can't I just tell a story? And it was just that kind of awkwardness. I had to kind of push back through that all the time. And that was a huge like roadblock for me. And it was like unnecessary. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
way, so I'm out of that. I eventually got out of that. I was living in the Bay Area, which is not exactly the right city, I think, to grow your music. Even though it's my favorite city in the world, probably it's just maybe not the best city for music. So I moved to Los Angeles, and I'm still trying to get the momentum of my music together again, and writing when I can, but still working constantly. Everything is focused towards finding a job. Everything is all my energy, like even creative energy, is trying to talk to somebody to get me a job, and like like it just
Yeah.
you're not sitting down and like being that artist that I really wanted to be. Um, so I was put on some medication because I was really struggling. I would find myself, this is kind of depressing, but I would find myself crying over random things that weren't important, or not that they weren't important, but things that I shouldn't be crying over. And something that I tell people a lot, this is when I knew I was having some issues, was when Anthony Bourdain committed suicide.
Yeah.
I cried for like 2 weeks. And like that is not normal. Like I don't think you're supposed to do that. But like for me, he was like an idol to me of some kind. And I didn't know it because
Yeah.
he's not a musician. I think I watched his show, and I even used to criticize him a lot watching his show. Like, this guy is such an asshole. Like, why does he think that he can talk to people the way he does, like when he goes to countries? And then one day he was just gone. And like I just broke down for some reason. I don't know why. I was just like, no, I was like, why did he do that? I'm like, it was so upsetting. And
Yeah.
I think I just looked up to him a lot and didn't even realize it. And
Sometimes it's
yeah,
just the most random thing that will help us to get at that pain that's just been sitting there waiting for us to confront it, you
yeah,
know? Yeah, anything can trigger it. Absolutely.
yeah. And I think even my like coworkers and colleagues and friends were like, yeah, it does suck. But they're like, something's not right. You know what I mean? Like, this is weird.
Yeah,
Cause I'm
yeah.
like, but he's anyway. Um, so that's when I saw my doctor, and he recommended I go on an SSRI.
Mhm.
And what unfortunately that made everything a lot worse.
Yeah, and sometimes it does.
So once I started doing my research, though, I realized that I don't think serotonin was my issue. I
Right.
was already kind of comfortable in I think I was too comfortable in my skin. Like I needed more like drive and almost agitation to go, and
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and unfortunately, I don't think my doctor noticed that. And I
yeah.
think so he made it worse.
Mhm.
So here I am, I'm already kind of like stuck in contemplation mode all the time, figuring out what my next step is. And he gives me something that's making me more like that. And
Yeah.
actually it took away like my zest, the color of my life in general. So that was really hard because it made it, like I said, it just made things so much worse.
Yeah. What would
Um,
you say was your kind of rock bottom moment?
well, when I started to get off these medications. So
Ooh,
the story's
okay.
not even over yet.
Yeah, oh, here
So
we go.
I'm my life is becoming worse on these medications, and I don't I don't know if you've tried any of these before, but they don't take effect right away. It's not like you can take an Advil and you can feel relief. It's like these things take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to kick in. So I'm like, I'm not really feeling relief, and if it is, it's kind of like semi. So I'm like, ah. And then that was kind of my life was like, eh. So I just became less motivated to take them. And then I would find myself, I'd skip a day. And then all of a sudden I'm like, has it been 2 days since I take my medication? But I'm like, things are getting weird. And I didn't realize why they were getting weird. You're like, oh yeah, like I haven't taken my medication in a couple of days. And same thing, like you'll just burst out in tears for no reason over something. And you're like, oh, what is going on with my life right now? Like, how is this happening to me? Um, because I realized that you can't just stop taking those medications like that. You have to
Yeah.
really have a strategy and
Yeah,
like a
you have to have
timeline.
an
And I
exit
didn't,
strategy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I moved from the Bay Area to Los Angeles because I wanted to be like, I wanted more sun to feel happier. I wanted to be around more music and entertainment and like to feel lighter in general, and then I was going through some weird things with the medication, and I started seeing a therapist, and he recommended that I even shave the pill with a knife, like very slowly, because not even cutting it in half, like, no, just
Yeah.
shave it. I'm like, all
Shave
right,
it.
if that's what it takes, I'll do
Yeah.
it. Um, and then I think the big like release came right as COVID hit, because I was really weaning off of my medication,
Mhm.
and I was seeing my therapist, and COVID hit, and we decided to talk on the phone. And within seconds of talking to him, he was like, "You seem like you're doing great." And I'm like, as a matter of fact, I am. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
really doing great. And I know that this is where you want to, or maybe you would want to introduce like what's the greatest gift of 2020. And I don't want to like take that away from you, but this kind of leads into that.
Go for it. Go
So I
for it.
don't, do you want to introduce that part or like ask me that question? All
So,
right.
Pierce,
Yeah.
what would you say was the greatest gift that most unexpected wonderful gift that 2020 gave you?
Great question, Audrey. I'll tell you. So I had this realization on the phone with him that I sounded good. I was weaning off my medication. I saw like a light at the end of the tunnel, and I was working two jobs, one after another. Like my entire day was taken up, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like, I felt like this relief. And I think it was because everything was out of my control all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I had no control over it. I was just,
Exactly.
I felt like maybe I was taking on too much of this on myself. Like, this is all my fault, that I'm not where I want to be in my career, or that I'm not writing more records and making those connections, or even meeting people. All of a sudden, it was just like the rug was just swept out from under me. And it's like, this is what you got right now. And I'm like, I was like ecstatic about it.
Yeah.
I really was. And like, it freed me. It really freed me all of a sudden. Um, so the greatest gift was not being in control anymore, not feeling like I was in control. I had the freedom just to be me and like do my thing. And
And just surrender and trust.
yeah, if somebody was like, you need to pay the rent, it's like, I don't have the rent.
Yeah.
I'm not paying, I'm
What are
not
you gonna
working. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, sue me, you know what I mean? And that was like a freedom of relief, because as we all know, like especially on the coasts, and if you're in a bigger city, rent
do?
is
Hmm.
seriously
It's
everything.
nuts. It
It's
is
everything.
nuts.
Your whole life revolves around paying rent. Um, so one of my dreams in life is just to be to the point financially, not to be like rich or anything, just to feel like rent is not like a concern of mine. I feel like that would be a huge like stepping stone, because that's what I felt for the last year. And now it's like a new goal of mine. I'm like, I just want to not have to think so much about rent, because
Yeah.
it's been a huge relief not having to.
I mean, there's a reason there's a musical called Rent, right?
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Well, I want to unpack a little bit of that wonderful juice there, because
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think this was an opportunity for so many people who were really struggling to finally be like, okay, no, everybody's struggling. We're all struggling in this together. And
Yay.
there's something kind of wonderful about that.
Yeah.
There's a great
Really.
relief in that, that it's
Mm.
not your fault anymore that you're struggling. There's a
Yeah.
reason.
And what's funny is there's a flip side too, where like I've heard some people talk about how they were just getting their career started, or like they just had trajectory, and then it's just gone now. So there
Yeah,
is a flip side to it. So it's not like and of course people have been dying, and
of
there's
course.
tons of
Yeah.
negatives from COVID. So I don't want to paint like a rosy picture or anything. Thank God that my whole family's been safe, and we've, you know,
Yeah.
been able to get some shots, and I don't have to worry about my older parents anymore and as much.
Yeah. Well,
So
I feel like there's been a lot of coverage and discussion of the negatives of the COVID pandemic on the news and, every place else. And so I really wanted this season to be a kind of celebration of our
mm,
endurance and our ability to find, the silver linings of this experience.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I got really curious. All of a sudden, I had all this time, and I have a studio and have my guitar, and like even my therapist, he was like, just play the guitar for 10 minutes every single day. Like he was trying to like do some CBT work with me. And
Yeah.
even for some reason, when you're in depressed, even the most joyful things can seem like a huge like a
Yep.
problem. It's like, oh. I have to play my guitar because my therapist does. It's like, wait, shouldn't I love this? Like, why do I feel like that? So
Mhm.
my journey to prolific started when I reached out on Craigslist to a band that needed a singer. So I just responded to it saying I was interested. I showed them some of my work, and they were like, "Yeah, here's a couple songs. Can you write lyrics and a melody to it?" And I was like, "Perfect. This is like right up my alley." And they didn't give me any descriptions except for the song title, which had no words or lyrics. So I had like to create this whole like story or like in a whole lyrical song based on one word or a couple words. It was very difficult, but it was the most rewarding thing because I had 9 songs in front of me. I had a project, and someone's like, "Go," and I'm like, "Yes." It's like this is what I've been waiting for.
Yeah.
So that got me out of my shell, and I was just started writing about all these things that were just like piling up for like the last 4 years or so, and like how I was waiting for inspiration, and there was no inspiration in these songs. They just played. There was track lists and a name. I didn't need inspiration. I just needed to do it.
Yeah.
And I think inspiration is wonderful, but it's something that should never be relied on for an artist. I think when you have inspiration, get to work, of course, but you should be working every day, probably, and like, so that when inspiration does hit, you get that cool song or you get that whatever you're working on, that cool idea out.
Yeah, I always say it's like you cannot expect, inspiration. If inspiration is a prince, right? He's not going to come and like knock on your door and be like, "Come to the ball with me." It doesn't work like that,
No,
right? Like you have to put on your dance shoes and get warmed up and get out on that dance floor, and dance with a lot of frogs before before you meet that prince.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So you got to be ready. You got
Mhm.
to be ready for when the muse does knock on your door and you've got your
Mhm.
guitar and your notebook already out,
That's
instead of
right.
like, oh, I haven't picked up my guitar in a couple of days. I'm only doing 10 minutes a day, so you better make this quick.
Absolutely. And I
You
love the
know?
idea too of just it really can be hard to just like pick up your guitar and, play for 10 minutes. It really does sometimes take discipline to keep
Absolutely.
like I said, it's like this devotional practice. As a writer, like doing my morning pages, sometimes it feels like a slog. It's like I can barely get like a sentence out. Like I don't know what to say today. Just like
Yeah,
blah 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 whatever. Um but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I always say to
absolutely.
people, if you can just give yourself like the minimum, and I'm talking like just pick up your guitar. Don't even play the guitar for 10 minutes. Just like promise yourself you're going to pick up your guitar every day. Or like, with a writer, it's like just open the document. Just open the document.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't write a word, like at least you took that moment to like confront it and say, "Hello, document. I have nothing for you today. I'll be back tomorrow."
Yeah, totally. Little
Yeah.
bite-sized pieces you can do really like you can do that. You can open up the text document. You can hold your
Right.
guitar. It'll feel good.
I mean, come on.
It'll
You
feel
don't have 3
good.
seconds? Come on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, I think the importance of having an outlet too is so important too. It just makes that so much easier. So my therapist was just pick up the guitar, but I was like, but what? Like for what? You know? So it's like after I wrote these songs for the band, it didn't quite work out. It just wasn't exactly the right fit,
Yeah.
but it gave me a ton of confidence, a huge confidence boost on top of my already like happy from being free boost. So I'm like, I'm getting all this like these ideas and I'm like starting to brainstorm again, and you're getting excited about how I can get my I don't want to say career because that's it kind of is my career, but it's also kind of just my passion and devotion, like you're saying. How
Yeah.
can I be my devoted to this again?
Yeah.
And work on it. I want to work on it. Um, so it gave me all this confidence, and that's when the brainstorming started happening. And I was talking to one of my friends, just trying to get some ideas down, like what can be an outlet for like these songs.
Yeah.
And as an artist, musician rather, there's a lot of boundaries to putting up songs, distributing songs to Apple Music and Spotify. So I needed to get rid of some boundaries. Um, and of course, you can just upload something to your own website. You don't need to distribute it. But I wanted something more. I wanted something more interesting. Oh, excuse me. Just fell off my chair there. Um, I wanted something more interesting. And that's when I had that mushroom experience.
Hmm.
And the podcast seemed like a really cool idea because I can record songs. I can record 3 songs in a week. Doesn't mean they're going to be polished. Doesn't mean they're going to be perfect. Like you would send them out for distribution, but sometimes people like to hear demos
Yeah.
because I do. Um, I love hearing like the Beatles doing their songs on just acoustic guitar when there's fuzzy in the background. There might be like somebody knocks over something. You can hear him really singing. There's no editing. There's something really beautiful about that and raw and like authentic. So
Absolutely.
I thought there's no boundaries to making a podcast. I can easily make a podcast and, talk about the song a little bit. I can also kind of promote the things that I've been doing. It's a way for me to communicate with my audience again. They can hear my voice. Before it was just, a man behind the screen like Wizard of Oz. He hasn't released an album in 4 years, or what has he been doing? Whereas this podcast, I can do as much or as little as I want. There's an outlet. Um, it it gives me something to work for, and that's I think every artist should find something that lets them have an outlet to work for. I think it's really important.
100%. I completely agree. And I'm always saying, as a creation coach, like, I just want everyone to find their thing. And it doesn't even matter what that thing is. Like, if you are a colorer, and you just like get a bunch of coloring books and you color every day, like, great. That's your thing.
Yeah.
Whether you're creating, a podcast or a coloring book full of beautiful colored pictures, like, it doesn't matter as long as you're producing something that is creative for you. So how has that
Yeah.
changed you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've really taken a hard look at what was going on before. So
Yeah.
um, I stopped seeing that therapist because I just did, I guess. I'm trying to think of why I did exactly, but probably just needed to move on. I was getting busy with my own stuff.
Yeah.
But he started the process of me taking a really hard look at my past, the things that were stopping me, or the things that would, when I would ask permission, just rhetorically, when I would be talking to him, and I'd just be saying something like, "Well, if only this, or if only they, or if only," and it's like, do you understand that you're asking for permission right now to do your own work? Like
Yeah.
that's no, you don't need anybody's permission to do this. So a lot of it was just taking a look at my past and finding out what would get in my way. And I actually started writing a book about it.
Hmm.
And that's the part about being prolific. I wanted to make a digestible 10 steps that people can take to get rid of some of those roadblocks. And I know it's been
Yeah.
done before, and I kind of wanted to take a different twist on it. So it's in the works right now, but you guys can find it on pierceduncan.net eventually when that's done. Um, but I had to take a hard look at 10 steps that I could have done earlier
Hmm.
to not make it so hard on myself, to not make it seem like it's some big deal.
Yeah.
You don't have to take it so seriously. You can have fun with it. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and showing yourself and showing what you do is a big part of it. Showing your work, not just doing something and having it on your computer or in a notebook, but putting it out there for people to see and to judge for themselves is a big step.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that, should be taken seriously in this life, but yourself is never one of them.
Yeah, it's only going to mess with you, and
Yeah.
you're not going to want to meet other people. And that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing too, is as COVID made me realize how much I'd been taking advantage of others, because
Mm.
I wasn't taking the time to reach out and meet with them. I wasn't taking
Yeah.
the time to be present with them. I wasn't taking the time to meet new people and to make new friends, when that's not cool. Like, I can benefit someone else's life just as much as they can benefit mine too, and the friends that I already have.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge thing too, is realizing that other people are really important to your overall well-being.
Yeah. Who do you think needs to hear this story?
Everyone. I didn't think about this question beforehand, but I
Yeah,
don't see
I
why
that's the
anybody would be left out.
yeah, I mean, that's the usual answer. I just like to ask that because I think it really does make you realize that, like, no, everyone is a creator and everyone should be creating. And
I
yeah.
think so. I really think everybody has the ability to be creative. Maybe just like you said, it could be a coloring book.
Hmm.
I think you build up a lot of pressure, and that can be anger. It can be a lot of your emotions start building up when you don't find an outlet for them. Even if it's sports, I mean, sports can be very creative, um,
Very
and
true.
exercise. So, I mean,
Hmm.
you have to have some kind of outlet and creative outlet. And maybe you can realize that the outlet you're doing, you can be more creative in that pursuit. Maybe you
That's
really
a
like, yeah, yeah,
that's a great takeaway. Be creative in anything you're doing, whatever it is that you're,
yeah,
pursuing, whatever it is you're interested in, just get more creative with it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this is the day and age where we might not be, we don't even know if COVID's going away yet. I mean, there's no
Yeah,
like,
we have no idea.
even in other countries, they're having big spikes. I mean, this is April 16th right now. So
Yeah.
we don't know what's going to happen in the future if people, because I'm still not back to work yet. And it's been over a year. Because here in California, the opportunities to work in the industry I was in are still not fully available. So
Yeah.
I can't make a living from that. So I'm really wondering what California is going to do as far as some kind of universal basic income.
Yep.
I think California is kind of a leader, at least on the West Coast.
Mhm.
The West Coast is kind of a leader for our country, and um, it takes a huge stress out of my life realizing that I have some money coming in that isn't dependent on how many customers I can serve at a restaurant, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like that is helping me take my energy, finding out when I'm most creative, and I can use that time. So
I
there's a lot. I've learned a lot
yeah.
from this last year.
I so often hear the argument, against a universal basic income that, like, if we do that, then there are people who will just get lazy and, like, do nothing. I have found that it is exactly the opposite. It is the people who feel
Totally.
forced and overworked who get lazy and don't want to do anything. Anyone who actually has the time to focus their energy on what they think is important becomes more prolific. They start creating more cool stuff. They start innovating, they start thinking outside the box, they come up with, cool problem-solving ideas every time, as soon as you
Yeah,
take away that stress.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel like the term even like lazy is so subjective.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like it's like just because I live in California and I would go outside and get sun, I would call my dad and he'd be like, "Oh, you're lazing around again in the sun." I'm like, I actually need the sun to be able to feel healthy.
Yeah.
Sorry. So it's like I don't we need to stop caring about what other people think in general,
Mhm.
but you know what? Another issue about UBI is we spend that money.
Yeah,
That money goes into right back into our economy, and people
absolutely.
who are lazy are definitely going to be spending that money on the things that make them happy. If that's being lazy at home on a nice massage chair, wow, you just spent your money on a massage chair. That's going into our economy. I don't.
Mhm.
I really don't buy the whole lazy issue. I think our country is so divided, though, that this is a whole nother rabbit hole. But I
Yeah.
think the fact that a lot of people have been put on some kind of unemployment insurance has it's really opened my eyes to how much better life could be.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's a great place to kind of transition here. So I'm going to do a little exercise that I love to do with
Okay,
my guests. So I'm going
cool.
to have you close your eyes for a moment,
Okay.
and we're going to take a nice deep breath together. And we're going to do it again. And this time I want you to see colored light come into your body when you breathe in. And what color was the light?
I was thinking like fractals, like of a crystal
Ooh, cool.
coming in,
Oh, let's do it again.
kind of
Let's
like a rainbow.
Yeah, okay. Let's get That's really cool. I like those fractals. All right, so I'm going to wave my magic wand over here. All right.
Okay. My eyes are going to still be closed.
Yep, because I
Okay.
want you to visualize this, okay? And everything that you deeply desire has just come to pass. Everything that you want to be true is now true of your life and of the world, okay? Now, I want you to just imagine you are in this perfect space and just look around and tell me what your life looks like. Tell me what you see.
Hmm. I see a grand piano.
Mm.
I see a big open window,
Hmm.
and there's breeze coming through, and there's curtains that I can feel the ocean breeze.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in this open room with big ceilings playing on this piano.
I want you to
How
really
to play
feel
very
that.
well.
Feel the feeling of the keys under your fingers for a moment and really hear the notes. Just take a moment to soak that in. Hmm. Can you smell anything?
Yeah, I'm smelling that ocean breeze, that clean
Yeah.
ocean breeze.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So
And yeah, it's
you're
wonderful
you're done
actually.
with that song, and I want you to go outside for a moment and kick off your shoes. You're going to walk in the sand a little bit and just feel what that warm sand feels like, and you can hear the waves lapping. What else do you hear in this space?
I can hear seagulls.
Mhm.
I hear the wind
Mhm.
going through my ears.
Yeah. So you're walking for a little bit, and then something unexpectedly wonderful crosses your path. What is it?
That's a little baby turtle right in
Oh,
front of me.
oh, it's so sweet.
And I'm
Yeah,
like,
so
oh
you
wow.
you find this little baby turtle, and what are you gonna do?
I'm gonna get closer down to like eye level and just talk to it for like 1 second or 2 seconds. Just say hi to it.
All right. Now
And then
this
I'm
is
gonna keep moving.
excellent. And I want you to get to a spot where you find some people that you know, and they're gathered. And what are they doing there?
Hmm. Looks like they're skateboarding, like on a
Cool.
little like in Venice.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
So I want you to join them for a little bit.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Just feel what that feels like. And then you get some really good news. Your phone rings and you look at it, and something really wonderful has happened. What is it?
I'm kind of embarrassed to tell you. Well, I just got news on my phone that my song got accepted for a Netflix TV show for the intro.
Why were you
So
embarrassed to
so
say that?
so I'm
That's
so excited
awesome.
about that. Yeah,
That's
so
fantastic.
excited. So people are gonna be very familiar with the song very soon.
Awesome. So everyone here, you tell them they're so excited. They say, "Hey, let's celebrate." So where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Money is no object in this world. How are you going to
Hmm.
celebrate this amazing situation that you're now in?
I'm going to take off my shirt down to my underwear. I'm gonna leave my underwear on, and I'm gonna run out into the ocean and freeze my butt off. And if anybody else wants to join me, you can. But I'm just gonna have a moment of elation and
Oh,
freezing cold, and I'm
that's
gonna go
fantastic.
under the water with my head under the water.
Oh, God, I love it. I love it.
And I think some people are running behind me too. I think some people are like, "Fuck it, let's go." I'm going too. I don't care.
Oh, that's great. I think we'll end right there. That's wonderful. I love it.
Thank you so much, Adrian. That was fun.
I'm glad. I'm glad. So, I want
Wonderful.
you to, that's something you can just kind of keep in your back pocket, that little world. It is yours to keep, and you can come back to it anytime.
Thank
I
you.
always say, music really helps to kind of pull you into that world. And so, maybe you can have a little A little piano music that can just put you, boom, right back into ideal worlds.
I like that. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
of course.
That was wonderful.
I'm so glad. So, folks at home, where can they find you?
Yes. Find me at pierceduncan.net. And you can find me on Instagram. It's at Pierce Duncan, DOTNET.
Awesome.
Yeah, connect with me there.
Fantastic. So what thought would you like to leave everyone with? What is if they only walk away with one thing today, what do you really want them to walk away with?
Hmm. I would say find a way to keep your energy, especially your creative energy, hold it safe and hold it dear to you, because the world is going to try to take that energy from you and
Mm,
take everything away from you. Not everything away, like in a bad way, not on purpose. Just you have to find a way to keep your energy to create, because you need it.
yeah, absolutely.
Don't
Thank
give
you.
everyone else your energy.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. That's absolutely wonderful. I am
great.
so
Thank you.
glad you were able to join me today.
Thank you. Me
And
too.
I hope we'll talk again soon.
Oh, we will. We will definitely. Thank you
Excellent.
so much, Adrian. Have
Thank
a good
you.
day.
You too.